first meeting of the Civilian Police Review Board, and I think I could say that this is probably our second anniversary in terms of how long we've been together and meeting. And, you know, I pondered whether or not I was going to share something of a personal note here in this meeting. And I am only because I was completely unaware that certain symptoms might mean that you have a certain condition. And so the Friday before our last meeting, I started having breathing difficulties. And it got worse Friday, Saturday, Sunday. As it so happened that Tuesday morning, my doctor's office called for something else. And when I told them about my conditions, and of course they have my medication list, they urged me to go to the emergency room immediately, and I did. Bottom line is, I had blood clots in both of my lungs. And so I was there, I was in the hospital for 4 days. I'm on blood thinner. One of my friends says it's like walking around with a ticking time bomb, isn't it? And I say, you know, in a way, you know, it is. But you know, I watch a lot of television, and we are bombarded by commercials for different medications, over-the-counter or prescription for different symptoms that we know of. But I had just never heard of this one around difficulty breathing would be the primary thoughts around having blood clots. And so I'm just kind of sharing this as informational for folks here, and if anyone is actually watching, you know, for me personally, I will have to be on blood thinners until at least June, which is when they will rescan to see if I have any clots left, and so you just don't know. So I'm sorry I missed the meeting, but thank God for that conversation with my physician that morning, because that's a very dangerous thing to have. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from previous meetings. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Second. Any questions, concerns? All of those in favor, please raise your hand. Minutes approved. Of the board members who indicated that your term is ending April 30th, and you indicated to the administration, to the mayor, that you wanted to remain on the board, have you heard anything? Okay, and I called. I contacted Deputy Chief of Staff Kate Bisciotti, but, and I'm in a little bit different situation because I'm one who said I didn't want another term, but I turned to our very capable counsel because something told me that there was something in our charter about this. And so sure enough, it says, members shall hold their seat on the board until their successors are chosen, qualified, and installed. So, even if you haven't heard anything by the May meeting, it is expected that you will be here for the meeting until I am, well, hopefully we will hear something in the next 30 days. But
Are you included in that?
yes, yes. But that's not going to prevent me from doing the next thing. Yes, Mr. Strickland?
Are there steps that the board can take to move that process along?
I'm having lunch with the mayor tomorrow. I mean, it's the mayor. I mean, it's in his office. Now that Rena Shack has moved into another whole position, because she had been delegated the responsibility to be in communication with both the IG's office and the board, it now goes back to Ms. Pisciotti. And so, and when I asked her about it, she suggested that I talk to the mayor. So that's what I'm going to do.
And where does city council, what's their role?
City council has no role in this.
It will.
It will. I mean, the mayor will have to do what he did before. He will choose and send those names over to city council for city council to approve them.
Okay. And so when council initially, because the mayor initially made in 2021 nomination for 9 appointees to the board, and then council, I think they made an additional 2 appointments, and then I think maybe did the mayor just submit that within his?
In talking with the president of council, I certainly have not talked to all members of council. He shared with me, I'll use the term appropriate. That was not an appropriate thing to do. That they're pushing for 2, was nowhere was it provided for in the charter. So I'm assuming the number is going to stay at 11, but that the mayor is appointing all of them. So my term does end April 30th, and I came to the conclusion that it was appropriate at this meeting to select a chair whose term would start May 1. We don't have a process in place where you go through a non-governance, committee. It just says that the board shall select. I would wholeheartedly suggest to the board that you consider my kind of partner in crime, my vice chair, Brooke Burns, to be elected as your chair starting May 1st. If there is a agreement around that, it would be appropriate for there to be a motion.
I'd like to move that she be appointed, that Brooke Burns be appointed as the
Elected.
chair of this. Elected. As
And it needs to be May 1st, so we're clear.
as of May 1st.
May 1st. It's been moved and seconded. Any questions, concerns, observations?
It's a discussion point. I think it would be important for the board to establish a process in place, right? So moving forward, because this nomination, which I full support in terms of Brooke in this position, it's not clear in terms of how we would make a selection of vice chair from there. And then also, I think it's important, whoever is established on the new board, in terms of these new appointments coming on, to have a say potentially in the election and selection of the new chair or vice chair moving forward. So I just think it's important as a process point.
Certainly, you could look at that process. I take issue with one thing that you just said. Even when the 3 individuals are selected by the mayor and approved by council, they cannot become, and I'll just say voting members, they cannot undertake any work of the board until they are completely trained. So they will be named, they'll be able to attend, but they will not be able to participate in the work of the board. And your point is well taken. Anything else?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
there's a motion on the floor.
Yes, I was
think
getting-
we
I
need
was-
to deal with that motion.
No, I was getting ready to go there right
We can
now.
talk about this later on.
All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands.
I abstain, just because I figured.
Congratulations. Thank you. And,
Still very weird.
and as I talked to Brooke before, and this still may go, well, I should say go against, it's something to consider in the future. I intentionally did not seek a vice chair. I think that is truly up to Board Member Burns, and so I would anticipate that by the next meeting, she may bring a candidate to the table to vote for vice chair. The next item on the agenda is change in committee assignment. Board Member Mary Younger, from this date forward, will serve on the review committee chaired by Board Member McIntosh. I'm going to come back to item 4 because I really want full participation in that. We have before us today the review of the remaining cases from the March 7th meeting of Chair McIntosh's committee, and followed by that, we have a case that was emailed out to the board members last week. That's not coming from a particular committee. We thought we could just handle that committee of the whole, so to speak. So, Mr. McIntosh, do you want to move forward with the balance of your cases?
Yes. First case is 22-0440. October 28th, officers were dispatched to a children's tutor camp. The caller/complainant alleged that her 8-year-old daughter was assaulted by a 14-year-old boy who himself claims that it was an accident. The teacher also agreed that it was an accident. The officers, after speaking with other children at the school, told the complainant that they felt like the incident was accidental. The complainant disputed their findings, and the conversation and interaction with the officers became heated and argumentative. A few days later, October 31st, the DIG received a complaint from the mother of the 8-year-old and alleges that number one, the officers violated her freedom of speech and failed to de-escalate the situation and got into her personal space, got into her face. Allegation 2, officers failed to provide their badge numbers to the complainant. Let's see. BWC footage from both officers and video from the complainant showed no evidence of violation of freedom of speech. In fact, the complainant continued to speak her mind throughout the interaction. However, one officer did get into her personal space, her face. The officer did advance towards the complainant with an elevated tone because the complainant used foul language towards the officers. The officer again got into the complainant's face and stated, "What are you going to do about it?" The husband of the complainant at that point had to get in between the officer and his wife. The complainant, he did this in an effort to de-escalate. That officer's actions were not within CPD policy and procedures. So that portion is sustained. The freedom of speech deal is exonerated, that portion of that allegation. BWC footage also shows that the complainant used both officers' names throughout the interaction. Prior to the complainant asking, one officer spelled out his name and badge number while the complainant was recording. When the complainant asked the one officer who had previously given it to her said no, the other officer pointed to his name and badge number on his uniform. The complainant's recording of both officers provided her with the information she had requested. So allegation number 2 also exonerated. So I motion that we as a board agree with the findings of sustained for allegation number 1 and for allegation number 2 exonerated for case number 22-0440. Yep.
Clarification, was there a specific recommendation in terms of for any disciplinary action or anything like that?
No. a recommendation from,
The IG's, I'm just confused in terms of, there's a sustained
yeah.
on one of the allegations for violation of policy?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and so in some of the cases, I've noticed that there is a recommendation for consideration of disciplinary action or recommendation of disciplinary action. Do we have?
Oh, I thought you meant specifically.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they always do that in those cases, so, yes.
Oh, wait, sorry, I'm just.
But I just didn't say that.
Okay, so that's in the report, in the memo. Okay, got it.
And this is for Brooke and Dr. Jones. We had a case involving I don't know if there was an allegation of a constitutional violation. And, or we have the discussion?
Yes, and
Okay.
then you have. Second. Now, please continue.
Okay. We had a case involving an allegation of a constitutional violation. I think it was that they were improperly detained, if I recall correctly. In any case, we made a recommendation to the IG that we not have a conclusion of law as part of the findings for constitutional violations. So here we have a allegation of a First Amendment violation. Could one of you help me to distinguish the cases, or are they similar? I'm trying to help us as a board, help the IG regarding what we're recommending as a policy for these constitutional claims.
Yeah, that was a case where I think it was the complainant alleged that his Miranda rights were violated because they weren't read to him during the course of his detainment and his arrest. And I think what we asked was that the reports stop short of making the legal determination that Miranda rights weren't warranted, because that's a determination to be made by a judge. So if that person, let's say, ultimately was charged with a crime arising out of the thing that he complained about, we wouldn't want to have a judicial determination in a report when that question of Miranda rights is pending in front of a court. And so I think we asked that the report simply say officer did not violate policy by not reading Miranda rights, but not go to the extent of saying Miranda rights weren't warranted because his Fifth Amendment rights weren't implicated, or kind of there. Like, stop short of the legal conclusion on a constitutional question and instead stop at policy wasn't violated by this action.
Okay, so would that recommendation apply here, or would you distinguish the cases?
I mean, it feels very similar to me. I would look at it as this: if your committee could ask the question, could this person have brought a First Amendment claim in a court outside of this complaint? Would another fact finder, like a judge, be the one who ultimately needed to make that decision about First Amendment rights? Then I would say yes, I think it falls in the same category, and the recommendation should probably stop at action of officer did not violate policy, but then not make a conclusion as to.
That's what I was thinking
Yeah,
as
First
well.
Amendment.
And so I'm just wondering if we're making this recommendation to the IG regarding constitutional claims.
Mr. Tobias, I had the sense you wanted to be heard.
I'm just nodding my head in agreement with what's being said. The IG should not be making those determinations involving constitutional issues, just whether there's been violation of policy.
Right.
So we'll just,
And then what's the and/or law? I mean, there's usually kind of an and/or law clause that's kind of tacked onto that. Where does that come into play?
I don't understand your question.
sometimes some of the phrases that are used is like the officer's actions was determined to be in violation of policy and or law, or was not determined to be in violation of policy and or law. I think sometimes that law piece is utilized. So is that, I mean, in those circumstances are constitutional issues? I'm just trying to get a sense of.
I think
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and it is the responsibility of the IG to make determinations about whether or not an officer's actions violated either law or policy. Typically, there's always a policy that goes along with whatever laws the officers are required to abide by. And so maybe that is the compromise that we make, right? If we're, suggesting that a policy was broken, it is likely that it's also going to be a law or just policy and not law, and not an instance where they're just breaking the law and not policy, right? And so I think in those particular instances, maybe Vice Chair Burns, the IG can strictly identify the policy that was violated, and then the folks who are actually issuing discipline can make determination about the other ins and outs of that.
Yeah, and in this particular scenario, maybe not saying that the person's First Amendment rights were violated, but saying that policy was violated by being in her personal space.
Precisely. But,
or-
well, they didn't say that the First Amendment rights were violated. They
Correct.
said that they were not violated, and that's what I was challenging, is they're making a constitutional conclusion.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, kind of steer clear of those types of conclusions.
So then, would this require an amendment of the original motion? Because was the exoneration on constitutional grounds, or was it on policy grounds?
Why don't we just make it on policy grounds? How about that? Just so we're clear.
You have to rephrase.
Yeah, how's,
What's in the report?
do you want to hear?
Let's see. So, no. But, I mean, I'm looking at it, I'm just trying to, yeah, I'm determined if I need to read everything. The complainant continued to talk throughout her encounter with the officers. The investigation found no evidence to support the complainant's allegation. And that's talking about the
Of a violation of her First Amendment claims, that's, I think, what they're saying.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that.
So usually, right before the IG signs their name, there is a summary conclusion.
At the end.
Where her signature is, Matt, right above
Yep.
her signature.
Based on the IGE's review of the investigation and supporting documents, I concur with the investigation findings. The one specific officer's conduct and demeanor was not in accordance with CPD policies and procedures. That's the getting in your face.
Yes.
We're all in agreement with that. Okay, therefore, it is recommended that the allegation be closed with the finding of sustained. And then it goes on to talk about the second allegation of the officers not giving the complainants their name and badge number, which was exonerated. So that one didn't specifically point to the fourth of it. So let's,
Just addressing the board. On that allegation, if you look up under the conclusion, it's just stating that initially in the report, we will say what the complainant stated. So the report is just stating, I'll just briefly read it. It says, the citizen, every citizen in the United States is afforded the right to be granted their Fourth Amendment right. It says in Ohio. So anyway, it goes on to say that we found that the investigator found no evidence to support the allegation that the complainant alleged. That's all we stated. And then when we go into our finding for the sustain is the fact of the officer's demeanor, responding and talking and getting in her face. That's what was sustained. That was what was in policy. That was the violation for the officer. So we didn't do any rulings or make any recommendations on whether or not that person's freedom of.
Sorry, quick, and what about the exoneration?
The exoneration part, again, that's on the second allegation. So the exoneration part was based on the allegation that the complainant was stating that the officer did not provide his badge and phone number, badge and name. And so we stated that they did provide it several times. The complainant was recording it, so that's what was exonerated, is that the officer's actions did not violate policy and procedure.
So there was no determination of the First Amendment in the report?
There was not. It's just mentioned, and I think what you're going to find as we go forward, we're trying to curtail what the allegation is. We always say what the complainant alleges, but we will start curtailing that so that the board understands this is what the complainant alleged, but we'll get specific as to what the allegation is, as to what we're looking and how that applies to the violation. So
It's helpful for me.
Go forward.
Appropriate.
Can go for.
Right, so it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? It passes. Your next case?
22-0444. And this is the one I emailed out. And hopefully you got an opportunity to read at least some of it. On November 1st, 22, the DIG received a complaint that was first sent to the Director of Public Safety via email. The complaint alleges through a TikTok video that an Instagram account belonging to a CPD officer is racist. The DIG reviewed policies and procedures that address social media use and unbecoming conduct. And after a review of the social media account itself, concluded that the officer's posts and actions on his Instagram page were outside of policy. Now, if you would like, I'll read some or all of the posts, but some in particular. This is the second post. The photo depicts a meme of SpongeBob SquarePants with Mayor Andrew Ginther superimposed over the top, with him appearing to say F12, which is slang for F the police, and burning a piece of paper that says, "If you support the police instead of criminals, crime will go down." The officer stated that he created this meme and stated that his intent behind posting the photo was to talk about policy and things that should be done to stop crime, but are not being done to stop crime. This post depicts Mayor Ginther in a way that suggests he is not supportive of CPD. And so that post was found to be in violation of 10.18, Section 4B2. Where it states the City of Columbus expects its employees to be courteous and respectful towards residents, supervisors, fellow employees, and public officials. This post depicts a news article picturing a CPD cruiser with the headline, "Columbus Police Policy Change Puts Restrictions on Serving Warrants Overnight." The officer added, "No more catching domestic violence suspect at night, guys. The best way to fight crime is to let the criminals sleep." A comment made by the officer on the post further states, "One lesson you learn as a police officer, You can't get in trouble for doing nothing. Sit in the parking lot, avoid the public, let criminals run loose. You won't lose your job for that. You won't get fired for that. You won't go to prison for that. This is what happens when you prioritize optics over fighting crime, which is the reason we have police officers. The officer stated that he did post the photo and that his intent behind posting this photo was to comment on the news article. He stated that it was unfortunate because it was the best time to catch these people. The comment made in the post regarding police action were found to be in violation of, again, policy 10.18.3A, noting that the SOP 1.01, which states, to fulfill this mission, sworn personnel assigned to patrol zones shall utilize preventative and directive patrol techniques in response to calls for service, etc. And I'll read a couple more, because this was concerning to me because, I mean, we have an officer that certainly you can get frustrated, doing the job. And certainly you can think some of these things in your mind, but when you start posting those types of things, you not only offend the public or some of the public, but you're also offending probably some of the people you work with. And so
I was part of that review committee. I found it highly disturbing. It seems like the officer has his own agenda and his own opinion, which he's most certainly entitled to, but putting it out on social media, I found very offensive, and his comments were very offensive.
And he talks about, like this last one, his intent and what he meant. But he posted it, but he didn't say in his posting what he meant until after question about it. And in each and every one of these that the investigator asks his intent of, he says the opposite of the depiction, basically. So basically, it depicts this thing, and he was saying, but I meant this. But let me do this. Let me read this one.
Which one is that?
Post number 10. This post depicts a woman in the kitchen. The words on the photo state, I brought home a new dishwasher. Now my wife is mad at me. Women are too complicated. The officer stated that he posted this photo and that the intent behind posting the photo was a joke. He stated that there was no sexist or misogynistic intent behind this photo. That post was also found to be in violation. And number 11, this photo depicts a man and a woman protester holding up a sign that states, "Stop killing black people." The words added to the photo state, "Go hold that sign up in the hood and shave them armpits, you filthy hippie." The officer stated that he was familiar with this photo and that he posted the photo. He stated that his intent behind the photo was criticizing people that accuse the police of a lot of things without taking in the perspective of the rest of the world. And that it's clueless people criticizing the police. When asked if there was any ill intent behind the photo, he stated, I do believe that women should shave their armpits. And it goes on and on and on. Yes.
There are some posts that had racial slurs.
That's right.
Right, and other ethnic slurs as well on the page. Correct.
Very evident that this officer was putting their personal feelings out, got caught, and didn't want to take ownership of it.
What was the recommendation?
From
From the
The
IG
sustained.
on, I guess, how many allegations and
Well, the persons, and I thought about this because 8 of the 26 postings were specifically named as being a violation, 8 of the 26. The person that sent the email for the complaint, they said that his post was racist. His post, not each individual posting. They were talking about his post. So I think
Now, was that plural or singular?
singular, his post, which
post.
contained,
Okay.
or his TikTok, Instagram, whatever it was. His page was.
Whole
was
page.
Yeah, his page, right. So instead of just saying, this one's
He said the
sustained,
whole
this,
thing.
the whole thing, because that's what the person alleged.
So my question becomes, in the recommendation, how come there's not part of it that says that this needs to be taken to the chief of police or something?
And it does, yeah.
But I was just wondering what the precise, I remember reviewing this, but I just wanted to get clarification on the precise language here, and I can pull it up
Okay.
as well.
So is my understanding that as a whole, the post was considered racist, and the post was sustained, that I'm sorry, the allegation was sustained
All the allegations
Yeah.
were sustained.
in the one post which contained 26
Well,
different,
the page.
the page.
The page.
Yeah, the page, I keep saying post. The page which consisted of 26 posts.
Yeah.
And Mike, what was the IG's recommendation? That's what we want to know.
Here it is, Mac, right
Yep.
here. This is his recommendation, there's your recommendation right there.
For disciplinary action.
She, like I stated before, recommended that the investigation be closed with a finding of sustained. In addition, the DIG has concerns that the information, message, and communication in these posts may give cause to readers and others to question the judgment or objectivity and the ability of such a person to be effective in their job duties. Furthermore, it is recommended that this investigation report be forwarded to the chief of police. That same deal, and if I have to read that every time, I will, but I think
Yeah,
they
no, I
do
see
that
what you're
on each sustained one, they have that same spiel in there.
Yeah, but this is for the whole thing. This is for the whole thing.
Yeah,
The whole thing.
the whole thing.
This is what their findings were for the whole thing.
Exactly.
So is there a motion?
And I motion that we agree with the findings of these.
Well, okay, so I just wanted to clarify, it's okay, sorry. Second discussion.
Yes.
So the allegation one is a TikTok video alleging the officer's page was racist and was part of the complaint. Okay.
Correct.
I guess the reason I'm asking this question is because even though it's packaged into one allegation, there are a series of actions here and violations here. And so I don't know in terms of obviously this is forwarded along to the police chief and the director of public safety, but at what level, when it comes to kind of a disciplinary matrix or whatever it might be, does it come when there are series of actions? Yes, we have one sustained allegation here. So that was just one of the curiosities.
Well, I disagree with that because it doesn't say that it's just one sustained allegation.
Well,
Can I finish? They give a whole long litany of things that this officer had on this page and what they brought policy violations. If you read that, for many of them, there are policy violations at the end of each one of them. So it's more than just one.
My understanding is that there's just one allegation for sustained. And so
For that whole page.
exactly. So I'm just, in terms of calculating an allegation against a particular officer, it would be one allegation of misconduct, unbecoming conduct is the type of complaint for sustained. And I'm just trying to figure out if there are violations of other policy, right? We talk about unbecoming conduct. That's the question. I'm like, I know that the Department Inspector General adds and has added other allegations as well. But I was just wondering if there's a reason that we had just one allegation here in particular.
I don't know if that's for you to answer.
Yeah,
Right,
I don't know. Maybe that's a.
But I
yeah.
think the goal was, again,
It's packaged. No, I understand
Okay,
that.
okay.
I'm just in terms of how it's being categorized in the system. Is this just one sustained allegation against one officer, or are there a set of allegations against? Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So this complaint comes as one allegation regarding the officer's page. And so with the investigation, what we did is going through and looking at each specific item on the page is what we look at, and the totality, because some of the things on the page you will look at may not have amounted to a violation of their policy. But the totality of everything on that page is what we looked at, and that's why there are violations for policy for each one. And based on that, we sustain that the officer's actions, again, some of it was very racist, some of it was very sexist, some of it was conduct unbecoming, and it addressed different policies, not just police policies, but it also addressed some policies that were city policies when it came to some of the information involving the mayor. So all of this was sustained misconduct up under that one allegation.
Okay.
I think what you will see moving forward, and this is pursuant to the meeting we had with the chief and some other members of CPD, and also pursuant to her earlier comment, is there at some point you'll see what the complaint was, like verbatim, what the citizen called in and said, and then you will see it split up into separate allegations based on a policy violation that was identified. For this one, I think after the meeting that we just had, you would have likely seen 8 to 16 separate allegations for each policy violation that was identified in the report.
Got it.
But for this report, it's just one allegation.
Like
One
an
sustained.
indictment, when an indictment comes down,
Exactly.
indictment for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And they may still do it once it gets to chain of command to do the review. They may still split it up
And
into
that-
separate
and-
allegations.
I was in a meeting today with the chief, and the chief made it clear that, some of these allegations that are being brought, you just can't do something about it overnight. It has to be a process in dealing with dealing with officers who are doing these types of things. So I'm like Attorney Ross. I really believe that it's going to be an accumulative effect that's going to weed out a lot of these police officers. So, go ahead, sir. I yield.
The police FOP are covered by a collective bargaining agreement that we all know, which entitles the officer to be disciplined for just cause. So within the confines of the bargaining unit is what the chief, or the collective bargaining agreement is what the chief can do. So I'm sure there are different allegations that have different levels, just like in any other collective bargaining or policy. But you are absolutely right. Sometimes it takes a paper trail.
And one of the things I think is important is clarity on disciplinary matrix and what that is, right? So obviously the chief of police, the Department Public Safety, they've got a process in which they will go through and navigate that. I do think even as a board, it's helpful for us to have awareness of exactly what that process might look like so that we can compare similar situations that have occurred. And if, there are recommendations, like a lot of the recommendations we make, obviously this is a consideration that the police chief will ultimately make, but even more transparency and clarity on what that disciplinary matrix looks like would be helpful for us. You know, I know we've talked a little bit in terms of like a training for our board to just know and be aware of, but I think it would be helpful just to know in the future.
I think that's most certainly a discussion that we should have, an understanding of just cause under the collective bargaining agreement, and the steps of discipline would be very helpful.
One suggestion that I might make as we look at the training for 3 new board members, we might pull out topics, including this one, where not only do they get it, but we get it as a refresher. It's done as a part of the full board meeting. Not to get ahead of myself, but the thought is that much of their training will be reviewing and looking at recorded sessions. But this whole topic about the contract and discipline has come up a few times. So this one, I think we might want to treat differently. There might be others, also, but there is still, say, confusion, or whatever. That's just a thought. I think I have a motion on the floor.
There is. One last comment, Madam Chair.
Yes.
We also have to remember as we read these that the IG can only make a recommendation. It is up to the division of police to make the discipline. So, yes, this to us is very egregious, and we all may want to make recommendations of what the discipline should be, but we cannot. We can only recommend that the
discipline be imposed.
Yes.
But not specifically what it is.
Yes.
And then one of the follow-ups I think we've indicated before is to get follow-up information about whether or not discipline was imposed or not based on these
Very
recommendations.
interested in this case.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
there-
as I recall at this point, and this goes back to our meeting with the chief, from that very first batch of cases that we sent over, those cases have not gone through the chain, so no decisions have been made from the very first group that we sent over. So just a reminder that it's going to take some time before that information gets back to us. Okay? There's a motion. It was seconded. Are we ready for the vote? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Do you have another case?
Last one.
That was the last one?
No, this one
You
more.
have one more? Okay, there it is.
Yep. 22-0447. On November 2nd, a citizen filed a complaint with the IG alleging an officer was being rude and discourteous during an interaction she had with the officer, and this interaction caused the officer to follow her home. Allegation number 2, the officer was abusing her power by being on her personal property and looking through the trunk of her vehicle without the complainant's providing permission. The complainant filed her complaint via email. The investigator was unable to make direct contact with the complainant via phone. The IG investigator reviewed the body-worn camera of the officer in question of her entire workday. The footage provided did not show any interactions that mirrored the information provided by the complainant. The DIG investigator also reviewed the activity report for Cruiser 92 that was operated by the officer on the date alleged. The activity report showed that the officer in question was at the substation from 1:27 p.m. until 3:06 p.m. The complainant's time frame did not match the fleet data for the officer. The complainant alleged that this interaction took place about 2 p.m. So not only was it on her body-worn camera for the entire day, nor was it on the fleet data report. The complainant did eventually respond to the DIG via email regarding her complaint. However, that email did not provide any additional information that was requested and needed to further investigate the allegation. Based on this lack of information, I motion that we, the board, accept the DIG's finding of unfounded in complaint number 22-0447.
Second.
Any discussion, questions?
Can he make the motion?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The chair typically does.
Excuse me, I'm tired.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you.
May I ask a question
Yes.
about the case that we had before this one? You know, it's deeply troubling, hearing that there is this process of discipline, that it could take a significant amount of time. You know, there seemed to have been a consensus from the board that we have an officer who is, the best you can say is he utterly lacks any sense of judgment regarding how his statements are going to affect the citizens that he's serving in terms of their relationship with the police. And do we have any capacity to make a recommendation to the chief of police regarding prioritization of certain kinds of cases that we receive? That is, once they go to the IG, once the IG makes a recommendation, is that utterly out of our hands? Can we, in addition, make a recommendation that certain cases be prioritized so that this doesn't just go to the bottom of the pile? Or, you've got somebody who's posting racist and misogynist statements. Public becomes aware of that. This affects the police department. Do we have any role in the way that this now gets processed? Or is that, nope, that's up to the police chief, and we've done our job of making a recommendation that the police chief look into that?
So what she's doing right now, at least initially when the cases go over, and Ms. Ross, you will have to help me, is it a deputy chief who is reviewing all of them initially?
Yes.
And who is that individual?
Convis, Deputy Chief Convis.
Okay. And at one point, was he over IAB?
I don't think he was over IAB, but he was a part of that unit in
Okay.
leadership there.
All right.
He just was recently appointed as a deputy chief.
Okay. And then from there, he makes the decisions as to where the cases go in terms of the chain of command?
Right.
So again, it's going to take time. And there isn't a process. Did you want something? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just listening, and
Okay.
I can chime in at the end if you want me to.
Yeah. But I don't think we have any authority.
Could we, is there anything limiting us from, in the memo or whatever we send over to the chief of police to kind of give those part of the top lines about, these cases with this batch that have come through, these are priority at a certain level? Because I think the
That's what I'm
prioritization
saying.
makes a lot of sense. I also think it makes sense when it comes to certain cases that we review across subcommittees, right? So, for example, we all kind of get our individual batches of subcommittee and of cases. We review them in subcommittees. We present them to the board. In certain instances, like in this one in particular, with board member McIntosh, getting this in front of the full board is the type of case that we would like to see ahead of time, right? So I think. I don't think there's anything that would necessarily limit us from maybe putting this in a memo to the police chief. Now, it's not going to have I don't know, authority behind it, but is any limits in terms of us being able to do that?
Right, so there's no legal prohibition from you putting something in the report asking that it receive some higher priority, but as I advise many clients, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And you just need to be careful in terms of, the other advice that I give is consistency in application. So, you would have to figure out some sort of kind of hierarchy
Yep.
in terms of which ones would be designated for higher consideration or priority, which is, I think, a dangerous path to go down. What may be important to one person may not be important to the next person. And, in theory, all of these are important.
That's right.
So just,
Coming from that world of collective bargaining, I most certainly agree. Because we're all upset over, but there will be cases that we all disagree or agree that maybe should be a priority, and then you start to pick and choose who the priority is, and you open yourself up to liability.
well, then the public says, well, how come my complaint wasn't given higher
Yes.
priority?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think in terms of like instances of excessive force and those types of things, I do think there are already steps that I think is taken in terms of how the board acts, how the city, how others take on issues. And so I'm just trying to think about, not to necessarily say, oh, this case we read today, now this needs to be on this priority level, but like it meets a threshold that we've standardized consistently in conjunction with maybe the Department of Public Safety, the police chief. I do think there are levels in some sense that there is prioritization. That's just my insight. I don't think, unless the IG's office does it differently, I'm just trying to get a sense of like, do we get, as we get cases, is it just one case at a time, or is we kind of reviewing it, or are there levels that we prioritize? That's just one thing I'm trying to get a sense of.
Well, the IG is under a strict timeline, so she wouldn't have flexibility to prioritize. She's got to get stuff done in 90 days regardless. Now, once it gets to you all, you may have flexibility, but again, that is a decision that is well within your purview and something that the IG wouldn't be a part of.
It's our job to get it to the chief of police timely.
Yeah.
And then it's the chief of police's job to then prioritize it and come up with the appropriate discipline. And we also have to remember, just like in a court of law, in just cause, you are innocent until proven guilty, and there's a process to go through.
Good discussion. I'm sorry, Ms. Younger.
So we know that from us, it goes to the deputy chief, and then from the deputy chief, it goes to a chain of command. Do we know what chain of command means, and is there some kind of a timetable? Do we have any idea what this looks like?
I think we discussed it briefly with Madam Chair's comments with regard to Detective Chief Convis. He is the one who will initially get all of the reports and will review them. I presume there are going to be additional people that are going to look at that. At that point, they have to make a decision about discipline, and there has to be another hearing. Under the contract, the officer has a right to a hearing before discipline is issued. And then once that is done, there's a grievance process as well. And so you could see arbitration over that disciplinary decision. And so I think it just depends on kind of what type of case it is and what appeals are made after the disciplinary decision has been made. So I don't know that you can put a time that's going to be consistent across every case that comes before you.
And what communication is happening with the complainant during this
Sure.
process? Is there ongoing communication? Because I know right now it's, a decision is made and sent to the board, and there might be other actions taken, but is there any process right now of if somebody files a complaint, it goes all the way to the police chief, and there's a whole process that's going through? Is anybody communicating with that complainant at all?
I do not know. I can only speak to the communication that comes from the Inspector General's office to the complaint, and then obviously, once you all make a decision, I believe there's also another letter that goes out to the complainant, but as far as CPD's processes and procedures with regard to that, the contract doesn't speak to it, so that is something we would have to ask executive staff over at
If I could,
CPD.
oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. If I could finish my question before Alan. So is there arbitration, et cetera? Is there a time limit, though, for a specific case, for a specific individual that files a case with the IG? I mean, does he or she have to wait 2 years, 3 years? How, I mean, is there
Before-
some, for some sort of a
For final
response?
disposition or
Yeah,
final
yeah.
adjudication? Yeah, there is none. I mean, the timelines that the contract speaks of are the timelines for investigating a complaint.
Yeah.
After that, there is no timeline for chain of command review.
And Mary, just like the criminal justice system, the just cause discipline system is slow. An arbitration, just to get to arbitration, can easily take a year.
Okay, but we know in a death penalty case, we know that a year, year and a half in the criminal justice system, that we're going to get there to trial.
Maybe, and again, death penalty could be different, but I would remind you of a conversation that I had with, she's on the criminal side, former Jenny Grubb.
Oh, yeah.
When I met with her, I think back in November, she told me that there were well over 200 murder charges, and I think most of those individuals were in jail, I believe, and that they were just trying cases from 2018 and 2019. And so, a very long time. And again, when to get it to the grand jury, when can it be set for trial? So it seems incredibly, I'd say, unfair, but that appears to be the way the system is going to work or not work, in terms of not having specific timelines for things being completed and notice being given. And certainly things that I think that are out of our hands once they get to CPD.
And
There are
and-
certain arbitrations that are happening right now for complaints that were received, a year or two ago.
Okay. And then to Kyle's statement, I know that the IG sends out a letter indicating that their investigation has been completed. Is that correct? And does that letter indicate that, I'm sure it indicates that it's going to be going to the board and then to the chief. Is there a mechanism when the chief gets it, that citizen is somehow notified that they have it? Or does it just, or is this all, is the notice from the IG the end for this citizen?
That is a question we would have to ask the chief of police.
And so one of the recommendations that I would put forward, and I think other civilian review boards do similarly, is actually process for them to be able to track the status of their complaint, right? And so whether it's through an online database where they have an individualized number or whatever it might be, that they can track the status of where that is. And that's something that not just the IG's office, but also the city of Columbus or our review board could hopefully establish. I'm sure will cost some money in terms of that. But I do think it's helpful because even in these instances in which it might take a while for the process to play out, I do think the board, at the very least, should have a role in terms of communication about what people can expect in terms of what's going on with their case. And so maybe if it's through a database or some way for us to be able to make sure that citizens know where their complaint is in the process.
We're going to move on to case 2023-0111 that was distributed to the entire board. Is there a board member who wants to volunteer to kind of present this case to the board? You want a paper copy?
So, a summary, the complainant filed a complaint with the Columbus Department of the Inspector General alleging misconduct by a CPD officer. The complainant alleged that on February 3rd, 2023, after being advised that the jail could not accept the arrestee without the appropriate paperwork, the CPD officer stated that the arrestee could walk out the front door, be let go for all he cared, as he was leaving in 2 months, and didn't give a F. After review of all the obtained evidence, it is recommended that the allegation be closed with a finding of sustained. The investigation did reveal that the officer did make the alleged comments, and he violated several CPD policies. And that's just a blanket overview. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to actually read the in-depth summary, but there were people present when the officer made that comment. And it was recorded. It wasn't recorded on body cam, but it was actually recorded from the facility, the jail. And the conduct was just very unprofessional. And so I don't know if you all wanted to have a conversation.
I believe he also refused to be a part of the investigation.
Yes, that is
Recommend.
correct. That is correct. He refused to be interviewed and a part of the investigation. He told the IG that they could proceed without his involvement.
And this is not about the case. It just left me wondering, did they really let a murder suspect walk that night? I mean, did they put him back out on the street? Now, again, that's not a part of this, but just someone who was curious about the fact pattern, just wondered what happened.
Well, I would have thought that would have been easily resolved because it's a matter of filling out.
It's paperwork. It's a matter of paperwork.
So simply,
So your recommendation?
My recommendation is that we agree with the findings of the Inspector General, that the allegation be sustained, and then also that the investigation report be forwarded to the Chief of Police for the Columbus Division of Police for review and consideration of disciplinary action in accordance with CPD policies and procedures.
Any discussion? All in favor? I'm
Briefly,
sorry,
in
is that your
terms of-
hand?
Yeah, sorry. In terms of what happens in these types of situations where the officer, they're leaving the force, right? Is that?
In 2
Yeah,
months.
so how does that impact and affect?
And he's actually on leave, isn't he?
Yeah,
Am
he
I
was
correct?
on FMLA.
And so just to the point of, we were just talking about process takes a while, there's a whole thing, like what happens in these types of scenarios? I don't know.
He's going to be gone.
He'll be gone.
He'll be gone.
And I think if I read correctly in that report, I think he kind of made a statement, something similar to that fact, that I'm going to be gone anyway.
He said he said, I'm going to be gone in 2 months.
That's what he just said. Yeah.
And I'm just trying to, in terms of, if you're recommending discipline, somebody's leave, I'm just trying to, is there a way to make sure that things are not incentivized for people, when they're going to be leaving in a couple months, and say, well, you're not going to be able to do anything?
Well, Kyle, even if there was, we don't have the ability to do that. All we can do is review and recommend. That would be up to the chief of police.
Yeah, okay, and I guess I just want to make note for the record that I'd be interested in knowing what happens in these scenarios, right? And just an interest that I would like to have. That's all. But I agree with the decision.
But I think it's important that we make these kinds of recommendations, because I guarantee you that sometime sooner or later, there's going to be an officer who is not getting ready to leave the force, that may have that same kind of mindset, and feel, that he or she is somewhat above the law. And I think that if we have something that's already, a precedence that's already been set, that it will serve those who are not in that type of situation where they're going to be retiring in 2 months, where it will already be in place.
And I agree, just like our second case today. That gentleman is not in the process of retiring.
That's right.
So hopefully justice catches up.
That's it.
Could we when we make this recommendation, could we just say in the recommendation to ask the chief to expedite this, since the officer is retiring in 2 months?
I don't think we can, but I
No,
am,
no,
I am,
okay.
yeah, but I am interested just generally what happens so that there isn't this kind of, I mean, there's got to be some sort of process in place so that if somebody's
Well-
retiring, they can't just like do.
Well, it didn't say that he was retiring.
Or
It
leaving.
just said he was leaving. So we don't know if he's going to pursue another opportunity to go for another department. But I think this is important to include in the personnel file
Yeah,
because
right.
that
Exactly,
personnel file would be
Absolutely.
reviewed by a potential new employer.
Because we did have another assistant chief that retired from the Columbus Police Force, and I think they went out and became chief of police in Reynoldsburg, I think it was.
Deputy chief, yeah, deputy chief.
I think he was chief at Reynoldsburg, or Whitehall, or whatever it
Deputy
was. Was it deputy? Okay. But-
If I may, I believe any active investigation that is occurring by IAB or now the Inspector General for an individual who is attempting to leave CPD is noted. So we get requests all the time from the Chief of Police. You know, these individuals are trying to negotiate some sort of buyout or they're trying to leave. Are there any active investigations going on? So it is very much considered, I believe, in that process.
Very good. Any way they can say.
Also for promotions, I hear from Deputy Blunt. There you go.
That was good.
No, we haven't
It's
voted.
been moved and seconded.
Is that a question? Okay. All in favor of the motion? Motion passes. Thank you. I think we've come to, it's 3:20, to a point where we should take a break. And I wanted to lift up at least two conversations that we should have in the remainder of our meeting. One, I would at least like to just open the topic of training to new board members and to, I don't recall, who's on your training committee? Who's on the training committee? Okay. I would share a thought that you really probably need to have your first meeting in May. And if my attending doesn't put us at over 6, I would like, to be there. And for each individual board member, if you can reflect back on our training, and we basically followed what the charter required. But now, in light of your own experience, you might want to add something else or have a thought about it or how it could be, presented. I think that the committee will really want to know that. And I'll talk about that more after the break. And then to have a discussion around the review of cases. Unfortunately, this month, whether it was around not having enough notice to the public or potentially someone being ill, cases couldn't come before us that was assigned. I'm hoping that today, before we adjourn at 5 and everyone leaves, that the review teams would meet and try to establish your meeting date for the month of April. But also, and I've suggested this before, if you could even come up with a day of the week, and if it's the second week or the third week, try to establish a time that you're going to meet all the time. And then I think in Board Member McIntosh's committee, they've actually established a place at one of the libraries. Maybe someone else has, maybe Board Member Strickland. But if you could do that and save that time the way you do for this meeting, it would make it so much easier. You work hard, you're volunteers. I absolutely, know that. And I know, because I do this in other parts of my life. You're in a meeting, you're adjourned. Oh, I won't say I've got all the time in the world, but I can get back to this. And before you realize it, the meeting date has really come around. So I want you just to think about that. Let's have some discussion about it when we come back, and also the training. IG Hendricks, did you want the opportunity to speak today? I think you presented a written report to us, but did you want the opportunity to give us an update?
I wasn't going to speak on the report, no. I just wanted to present it just for everyone to kind of look at it. I knew the meeting would be busy, and that's something we can talk about at the May meeting if anyone has
Okay.
some questions.
And I will also make case assignments for next month, okay? Let's take about a 15-minute break, which I believe gets us back here at 3:40, okay? resume our. There's a heated discussion going on this side of the room. It seems to have been going on for quite a while. Thank you. I like the fact that you're engaging each other in discussion.
Beautiful.
Okay. We just need to restart the meeting. So back to the agenda. So let's just kind of first start with the idea of training. I've asked Dr. Jones if she would please convene her committee this month. I'm holding out hope. And I also had reached out to Mr. Tobias. I don't know about each, member, but when I first started serving on this, I actually kept almost all of the materials and notes and everything. So we do know that under City Code 235.01 something C, that our new members will have to have instruction in police tactics. There need to be a ride-along. And I would just, I don't want to call it a suggestion, but for individual board members, if that is something you might want to do again in light of the fact that you've been doing this now for 2 years.
We were promised a helicopter ride.
We were.
And we've done our ride-along on the ground.
Do we still have helicopters?
Yeah.
They're never.
I don't know if you really
They're gonna probably buy more helicopters, they're not gonna buy less.
Well, at one point, there were some folks on city council who wanted to do away with our helicopters, and I'll just leave that one alone. Point taken, Pastor.
Thank you.
Of course, we had seminars on all kinds of constitutional issues and criminal law. Here's a specific topic, and I'm going to put the board members on the spot to see if you can recall. We wanted instruction on de-escalation techniques, and there was a presentation about that. Did that satisfy your needs on that topic in terms of what was presented, or should we take another look at this?
It didn't work when I needed to de-escalate myself.
Yes, sir. Of course, there was training in diversity, inclusion, cultural competency, and implicit bias. And I think, again, going back to the whole, contract, I think that presentation was presented by the law firm that actually negotiates for the city. But there's been a suggestion that we should have someone from 2 departments, and I know that I have their names. So again, some thoughts, around that. And I don't even recall how many meetings we had that were training. I mean, for a year.
It was a lot.
For a year. And so I am concerned, and I know that we will need to rely on Mr. Ryan unless there's another hire by then to coordinate, much of this. I think it's probably going to be challenging, but I think it would be preferred if the 3 individuals could actually be in the same place, to watch these materials, et cetera, rather than saying it's kind of self-directed, you're going to sit home and watch it. But we've got to work all of that out, and we need to do it fairly quickly. And I probably should even remind the folks involved with the administration that all of this has to happen. Because as I said before, and I don't think I had that right in front of me, they have to be approved and go through all of the training. And we don't use the term certified before they can deem to actually serve in a regular capacity on the board, which does bring me to another potential. We had the group, was our group NACOL? Or was it your group? We never made a decision about whether or not we should have a membership in that. And as I recall, they have an annual conference, which I'm thinking was maybe in September last year. So I think we should really look into that and make a decision about it. I don't anticipate that the whole board can go, probably, well, anyway, that's this thing about meeting. But I think we should consider that in terms of ongoing training. If you, as an individual board member, after you leave this meeting, if you think of a topic or something, or I'll just throw one out. If you thought that the training in diversity, inclusion, and cultural competency was not quite what you wanted, then let's please share that, because I think that newly elected Chairperson Burns will be able to deal with a number of that. But any thoughts right here and now about training for new board members?
I only have one, because I think it took a long time for the people on the board to really understand what the board role was, to be honest with you. You know, what our actual responsibilities were and what we could and cannot do.
Yeah, and the scope of our work.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that is critical.
Yes.
I'd recommend for just similar to the way, I think it was, I don't know, it was Baker Hostetler, one of the groups, when we were part of the Civilian Review Board work group, there was a presentation or training of the different types of civilian review boards across the country and the different models of how civilian review boards are structured. I do think a training like that, it can kind of get to Chairmember Fluharty's point around how we can actually how we operate as a board and how that compares to how other civilian review boards operate. The presentations that they've provided have been pretty fantastic. I don't know if you've got some.
Well, so for some of the other boards and commissions, I participate in onboarding, like the Graphics Commission or Board of Zoning Adjustment. They'll bring in a new person to meet with the director of the department and the admin staff, and I show up. I'm going to one tomorrow, and I just do a 10-minute. I've got some bullet points.
Okay.
I highlight some stuff. So if you've got 3 new board members, I'm happy to schedule a 30-minute meeting with them. We can all pick a place and time in my office. Nobody else has to be there, and I'll just give them all the information you tell me to give them about role of the board. We could talk about public records. We can talk about open meetings. We can talk about all the rules and regs and the bylaws, and I can kind of give them a 101 tutorial.
Yeah, I would like that.
Can we have an hour?
I'll spend 4 hours with
Yeah.
them if they want, but I'm
Yeah.
guessing after 30 minutes,
Yeah.
they'll get sick of hearing from me.
No, I love that. No, I think because I do like to appreciate, especially given the timing of at least fast tracking some of these processes in terms of for that initial onboarding as they are going through these other the police training.
Just
Yeah.
stop you for a moment. Are you referring to what Mr. Tobias just said as a process?
Yeah,
You
it's
said
like-
fast tracking.
Yeah, like,
so
sorry,
I'm-
streamlining. So like, basically, because it's going to take some time for board members to be fully qualified, what are the things that we can do right away to schedule beginning? If somebody was appointed to the board, they've set up a meeting very quickly. This is part of the onboarding process, walking through, these are all the other trainings that you'll need to go through to be a qualified board member. I think just if we just kind of establish that in a process so that people don't, feel like they're not going to be officially qualified for another 6 months, basically. Because I don't know how long the process is going to take.
Mr. Tobias gave me a pretty, I thought it was a bold estimate.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
from the moment council approves, I think I said 6 weeks.
Perfect.
I
Okay.
mean, it needs to be accelerated for sure.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay.
And I do think that
Right?
That's great.
candidates should be made aware of that, before they've gone through the process. So I certainly don't know about each of you, but I remember reading, is it in the charter? That basically says we must hold 4 meetings a year. Well, we certainly have surpassed that goal. I mean, and I didn't know, but now we've been at it for 2 years and we see more and more work coming our way. Requests for looking at other things that the board, might be doing or doing differently. That's why I say, I commend each and every one of you and myself for taking this on as a volunteer. And again, as you know, it's just, so we now have board meetings. Most of you on some type of subcommittee, and I'm not talking about the review committees. Maybe you haven't had to meet in a while, like training, but now it ramps back up. So I certainly hope that your efforts are appreciated, because I certainly do. Okay, so again, anything else about training? Shoot something to Dr. Jones. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, in trying to work with Mr. Tobias on this training for new members, Dr. Jones, are you going to be working in conjunction with him, trying to categorize the things that?
Actually, the responsibility is here.
Well, that's
with
what
the
I
training,
said.
with the training committee.
Well, okay, all
So the
right.
committee is going to meet, basically, and we're going to identify the trainings that the new board members should have. We probably even identify any refresher courses that the
Okay.
board as a whole needs to have, and that would include Mr. Tobias's
All right.
training.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if you need me to attend the committee meeting or want to touch base before or after, let me know. I can send you exactly what I sent Chair Jackson. And then, yep, the onboarding that I would do would not be required because it's not in the statute, but you could certainly incorporate it, at the beginning.
But, and I think, to be completely transparent, when I talk with Mr. Tobias, I don't believe it's his intention to be a part of every meeting with the new board members, to be a part of the training. Again, we've got to figure all of this out. And again, I turn to Mr. Ryan because he's going to have a role to play, okay? So back to the topic of the discussion on Inspector General case reviews. So I think as we were taking a recess, I could see subcommittees chatting and hopefully choosing dates. Now, one thing, I spoke to a member of the public who has attended some of the meetings that have been canceled, and she expressed a concern, and this was specifically with the libraries, that sometimes when she asked library staff, they were completely unaware that there was a meeting taking place. So please make sure that you have confirmed with the library the whole meeting date and place, room number, and that would also go in the city bulletin, right? That needs to be shared with members of the public. Is anything else that you want to bring up? Yes.
Question about, is there a formal policy in cases where we're not able to meet? This last month, there were, just a number of conflicts. Is there a rule from the city council about board meetings that we're not allowed to exchange our notes apart from a subcommittee meeting? In other words, this last month, our subcommittee had just tons of conflicts. By the time we got around to being able to finally work out the conflict, it was too late to give notice. But we had 4 cases, and we were able to just exchange notes
Did you
if we were in
vote?
agreement.
Did you vote on that?
They were delegating the responsibility, if we were in agreement, they were delegating the responsibility to decide on our cases to me, the subcommittee chair.
I'm going to actually ask Mr.
So I was
He's
asking.
he's shaking his
so
head
that's
already.
simply not able to be done.
You can do that. And that's what I was.
And is that written somewhere, or what, how does that work?
So you can, the open meetings requires that all deliberation and discussion be held in open. So in terms of exchanging notes, that's fine. Information gathering, fact finding, if you're just exchanging notes and looking them over to prepare for future discussion and deliberation, that's fine, you can do that. This delegating you to be the sole fact finder, no, because again, if it's a committee of 3, you need 2 for a quorum, you need majority for a vote. You have to vote
have
as
to
a
meet.
committee to decide what course of action to take on any particular complaint.
I actually think that's really helpful. Just, one of the questions in terms of the way in which we structured the process was that we would have subcommittees of 3, and then those subcommittees would meet individually. They would ahead of the time fill out their investigative review sheets, and then we would ultimately bring that. There might be discussion that happens, and then we would ultimately bring that to the board. That in particular, that process that we set up is not a requirement, right? So could you, in theory, not that we would do this, but could you basically do this type of situation, but instead of voting, instead of a full vote, you would present your one review sheet reflective of the notes for deliberation at a board meeting? Is that possible?
Right. I mean, I think I understand
Yeah,
what you're
yeah.
saying, but yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct that the formation of the committees, you weren't required to do that. That was to break it off into more manageable bites because of the volume of complaints that came in, and that's how you decided to do it. But if you want to tweak the process, the board as a whole would have to decide to change the process, and then depending on what that revised process looked like, I could provide a legal opinion as
Okay.
to whether it was legal or not, and then you could move forward.
Okay, that's helpful, because one of the things that I was thinking about potentially is if we were considering establishing one, or again, this is potentially down the road, 1 or 2 larger subcommittees to break up the way in which we divvy up some of the cases here. And then those subcommittees consist of rotating membership, so that it isn't always on one or a set of people on these subcommittees. The reason I bring that up is because it's less meetings, and if you're a member of the public and you're trying to see what all of these cases, we are right now, in effect, asking people to go to meetings on many different days and then also come to the board meeting when it's scheduled for a full vote. So just a recommendation for consideration as we talk about rules and regulations moving
I am
forward.
going to, I think it should be discussed, and it should be a decision by the board. It's your recommendation, but everyone should really think about what that means for you, potential time, et cetera. I would share with you, I mean, because I did read the recommendations, and I think I've heard a couple of folks say, let's give this process a little time. I don't think you're at a point where it's time to start rotating people on committees. Give this a period of time, and definitely wait until after the 3 members are full members of the board, the 3 new folks, before you start tinkering with that. But I believe you sent that email to the entire board?
Most of the board members, and it was addressed to the
I know,
entire-
it was addressed to us, but I went back to look at it. So I'm going
Yeah,
to
it was-
ask
I don't think it was to the-
Chair-elect Burns
If you want to share that.
that will be a part of what she brings to the board and to discuss.
Got it.
And there should be a full discussion, and the board should feel very free in terms of sharing their views. And as I say this, Mr. Strickland, I know you was only Bess, but you're one of what I guess will be 11 again. And so every board member should think about that and how it potentially, impacts you. It's more difficult to get, and keep in mind, there are 11. The most you could have would be 5. You can't have
Yeah.
6 on a subcommittee. If it's difficult for 3 people to get together, how difficult is it for 5? Just something, not, I would almost say I don't have an opinion because I'm not going to be a part of
I
this.
can hear a little bit. Well,
But,
yeah.
but just something, to think about and to discuss. But does everyone have their meetings tentatively scheduled? Yes. Thank you. So
We don't.
Chair, or should I say Chair Burns, gets through, I do have something I want to say in reference to this, but I'll yield to her for right. She had her hand up before I said anything.
So I would just wanted an update if we have one on our request to city council for virtual meeting, and
Right.
what the status of that is.
So I think I said to you that it would be helpful for you to reach out, or the Chair Jackson to reach out directly. Laura and I,
I wasn't here, because that's the discussion at the March meeting. Okay.
yeah, Laura and I saw a draft version, legislation related to virtual meetings for the Civilian Police Review Board. We provided our edits and feedback on that draft, and then we didn't hear anything for a while. And then I checked back with Laura, and I heard that it was on pause because there was some consideration being given to a citywide application as opposed to just the Civilian Police Review Board. That's the last I heard. And so that's, I think, when I emailed you back, Board Member Burns, and indicated that it might be better for someone from the board to reach out directly to council to find out what was happening.
I would love to do that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I was also going to, I'm sorry. I was also going to kind of just more directly answer Pastor Nathan's question about, where do we find that rule, or where does that come from? I mean, in a general sense, your initial authority is from charter and statute. You look there first to kind of see what guides your behavior, and then secondarily, bylaws and what's articulated in bylaws, and then rules and regulations, and then the default is Robert's Rules of Order.
I want to say, that I agree, and I think that all of us, need to consider they're on these subcommittees, one day that we lock into, because the way my schedule goes, I can't do a whole lot of this, disjointedness and dysfunctional, because I never know when I'm going to get a call. As a pastor, I never know when I'm going to get a call, and I'm going to be in the midst, because when it comes to my parishioners, they come first. I'm just going to be very frank with you. So if I know Kyle and I'll probably talk about this, and hopefully we can set a day, the same day, every month, so that we will meet then and we can do what we need to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the way, the reason why I brought up rotating membership was not, and it's not to not set this process forward, but it really is an indication of if other board members are available to attend and participate at these meetings, if they so choose to. Not that they would, because it's a lot of subcommittees, but if you streamline the amount of subcommittees we would have, you could actually have more consistency across the way in which our boards operate, or our subcommittees operate, in terms of what decisions are made. So something to think about. Obviously, this will be presented to the full board, but I agree with having a consistent day. And ideally, it's consistent too, so that the public is generally aware of when subcommittees are meeting. So if we maybe are able to coordinate at that level, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, when I say until then.
Tuesdays, yeah, I got you.
Until then, we need to have a day set when the current subcommittees, especially you and I, we set, because I can't speak for anybody else's subcommittee, but for the one that I am assigned to, I just think we need to have a set day when we meet, because that works better for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm only smiling because I am pretty sure I strongly encouraged that 2 or 3 meetings ago. And you're just right. If it's there, just like this meeting, if you lock it in, and I did make the comment potentially about it being a Tuesday, because when we've had the need to schedule a second meeting in the month, which we did in December, and I think we did in February, it was a Tuesday. So I don't know how that works, for everyone.
Chair Jackson, the other reason it would be good to set dates in advance is for notice requirements. That way, if you pick all the dates for the next 6 months, you can publish it one time.
And also, within room to have your meeting, if you lock it into that day, you can always tell whatever that library or whatever it is, we'd like to have this date etched in stone.
And I know we're in this situation right now because of the lack of, because of some vacancies. But, you know, we should have at least 3 members on subcommittees. And I know we've kind of haven't been able to have that, but I think moving forward, that's just a process because, again, we don't formally, at least in our subcommittee meetings, we're not formally voting until it's brought to the board. And so that hasn't necessarily been an issue, but I just wanted to bring that piece up. If there was a split decision, what that looks like, if you only have 2 members versus 3.
Before I commence to assigning cases, are there any other items to come before the board? Did anyone want to bring something up? Okay. Then for our next meeting, starting with Pastor Nathan's committee. And I also don't read the first 2 or 3 numbers. So it's 0564, 0566, 0571, 0582, 0586, 0588. Again, that goes to Pastor Nathan. And I'm going to hand, as I do these, I'm going to hand you the ones that I'm just assigning. Or do you need them? You don't need them, okay. Recycling, here we come. Mr. McIntosh, 0604, 0612, 0018, 0032, 0039. And then finally, Mr. Strickland, 0043, 0054, 0060, 0065, 0102. Those are all of the cases. I think we had a total of 16 cases to be assigned today. Is there anything else? Is there a motion? I'm sorry. Because I can't see you down there sometimes. You've got a blocker. Did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, just.
Okay.
This could be part of the kind of discussion in terms of how we assign cases to the review board. I think some people had some questions about how those determinations were made.
They are handed to me
And then-
in a pile. No, I do not read them all. I simply start from the top of the pile.
Yeah.
Well, I divide them. I know the number, and the way they are presented to me by the IG, that's how I assign them.
Yeah. And then I'm just thinking in terms of to the point that member Nathan spoke to about prioritization. When we receive because I'm just trying to figure out a way in which we don't just get inundated as a board, in which every meeting it's the reviewing of every case just like this, about how we internally get cases to the police chief sooner rather than later.
The cases go to the chief literally, I will not stay here, so within, I would say, 2 to 3 days. If this is what we're talking about, conveying them to the chief, I come downtown, I go to the IG's office, and I sign off on all of these. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and so
And
I'm
then they are sent to her.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm saying that is in terms of the speed at which we are the cases that we are receiving is just in chronological. Basically, as soon as they're finished chronologically, we're getting over. I'm just trying to get a sense of the caseload, of what is in your pile and then what is in our pile on queue. Then goes to the police chief. I just don't know what the queue is like. How many cases are pending review by the police chief? How many are pending
So let me
here-
ask this. IG Hendricks, could you tell me, or tell us
Yeah.
right now, how many complaints are in your office?
I can go over everything.
No, I don't want you, I
know
just, I mean,
how many
can
complaints are in
someone
our
give me a
office right
general
now?
number? I mean, of how many cases are pending?
Okay, so I can give you as of March, as of the end of March, because we get complaints that come in all the time. So right now, let me just, right now, we have, as of the end of March 31st, we have 62 active investigations. That's what's open. So when we close the investigations, we give them directly to the board. I know normally, before the board meeting, we pack up everything. So as soon as it's closed, we send it over for it to come to the board meeting. So
So there's
there's
62
nothing,
in
so
the
as
queue.
of today, there would not be, unless we close something today before we came in, of course.
Yeah, that's helpful. And no, the reason I was asking is because I just want to make sure then figure out like where there could be a bottleneck in terms of on our end if there is or there is not, and what that would look like. Because in certain times there will be meetings in which we may not be able to get through all the cases just like this. And so I just want to make sure that when that happens, that it's still, we're not slowing things down even further.
Well, when that has occurred, and for whatever the reasons were in February, we had to schedule another meeting. Because, and I think that the chair can kind of gauge, because, she's getting the information, from the IG. So I knew, I think I was in your office last week, that I had 16 cases to distribute today. And it's been, I don't recall what an average would be from meeting to meeting, but I don't think there's ever been a time when I have assigned an individual committee over 15 cases.
No.
I'm not even sure about 10.
No, I don't-
And so it doesn't appear as if the IG's office is being flooded with more, complaints. This kind of seems to be, standard. We'll just have to see.
Okay.
Well, and I just wanted to commend you all, because I'm just thumbing through the report, and the fact that you all have been able to process 606 complaints in a 6-month period in 2022, even regardless of what happened with the outcome, because I know some were administrative closures or past the date, but that's a significant volume. So if we keep with that trend, then it looks like over 1,000 for your team for a full calendar year is possible at
Yeah.
a minimum. So hats off to you all.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive. I mean, comparatively to what IG's office all across the country, to be able to process complaints that thoroughly and within that time frame is big. So kudos to your office and everybody, all the investigators as well on that.
Thank you.
I do want to say, how much we appreciate you. I know many times, it may not seem like that, but I do want you to know that we do appreciate the work, the time and the effort that you guys are putting in, for the citizens of Columbus, Ohio, and then for this board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just before closing, since this is your last meeting as the chair,
Yes.
I would like to say thank you to Chair Jackson for your leadership and your friendship. I've known you many years, and I have enjoyed working with you, and I wish you nothing but the best. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And I will share with you that we have a mutual friend, one Judge Lisa Sadler. She says that the two of us should take you out.
I agree. I agree.
I wouldn't have denied that either.
No.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Adjourned. Thank you.